Firstly, I mean, I know Tim can't be here because I think he's got a house move, hasn't he? But how's Johnny Brooks doing? Because he's been a little bit poorly.
Yeah, John would like to be here tonight. Is this working?
There we go. Good evening. Thank you very much for turning up on a Monday night. Much appreciated. Your view up there, thank you very much for those who've travelled as well. John, yeah, he would have liked to be here tonight, but he's been a bit poorly over the past few weeks. But last week, I'd say he's had some positive news. His tumour has not grown, and they're taking him off the steroids, which, if he'd have been here, he would probably quote him from the Bible or OK Magazine or something like that. But yeah, it's positive move forward for him. But he sends his regards, and yeah, he's on a slow mend to get fit enough to start recording during this summer.
Question for the filmmakers. You've made films about Arthur Lee's Love, Mott the Hoople. What attracted you to this story? What made you want to make this film?
Well, we'd actually tried to do something on the Charlatans a few years ago when Alan McGee was managing them, but it didn't amount to anything basically. And then we heard that there was, doing some sort of telling stories, anniversary gigs, and we thought it would be a good time to try and do something. And I just thought at that time they were, it was, I always thought as a band that they had something about them, and the period kind of leading up to telling stories and the Charlatans album, it was just one of those periods where you could see a band kind of like, becoming a great rock and roll band kind of with every release, I think, and the records were getting better and better, and I just thought it was a, great time for them as a band, musically, and I think as well they were an interesting band, they always kind of were quite forward thinking, and they were doing interesting things, and working with people like the Chemical Brothers and stuff. So I just thought it was a good, they were really like, one of the UK's kind of like, great groups at the time, and so we were interested in doing something from that point of view. And obviously it was a, obviously a strange time for them, I guess, as a band, because they went through a lot. But the music was great, as good as anyone was putting stuff out at that time, I think.
Martin, how do you feel about the film? First time you saw
it? Yeah, it's first time I said it. I never realised, just to let you know, kids, if you're ever going to do an interview on one of the hottest days last year, with a really big window, with a leather jacket on for an hour and a half, and fucking melt. Well, there you go. Lesson learned after all these years.
Well, you look gorgeous. But...
Oh, well, there you go. Yes.
Mark, what did you think of it?
Stereo. I thought it was the first time I've seen it, and I got a bit emotional actually. I thought you'd done a very good job on it. There's a few holes in it still, but we can do part 2 in another 15 years time. I think you captured a good part of how we were feeling at the time, and well played. Have you got any freebies on it?
Rob's obviously a kind of huge presence in the film. One of the things that you all say is that prison changed him. I mean, what exactly? You're not too specific about that. I mean, Tim says he got into drugs that were slightly darker, it got slightly weirder. But how do you think prison changed him? Either of you.
Yeah, I mean, Rob was endearingly couldn't give a toss attitude, and he really couldn't give a shit, which was very, as I said, endearing. But I think that helped with his creativity. But I think the coming out of prison, I think Mark.
Well, he was going through a few personal crises at the time.
Yeah,
He was split up from his missus and going through divorces. Hard enough for anyone. Never mind when you're just coming out of prison as well. So you know, there was a lot of well, he was going through a lot of shit at the time, and I think in the film, you know, John mentioned it, but he was sort of like just sort of like coming out of it.
Yeah.
And there was a period where it was a little lean for him creatively, but he was just getting back into his stride. And you know, he definitely had a bit of a devil-may-care attitude to life, and
I remember, yeah.
he would push things to the limit, and he did on several occasions.
I do think he, even though he did 4 months, I think he did, in that time, get slightly institutionalised.
Really, in what sense?
He was always up at 7 in the morning, recording the studio. In fact, he was putting on cooking duty when he was in prison, and he actually turned into rock chef now and again at the studio.
One of the things that the film makes clear is that the album was practically complete when he died. If he died in the first week of recording, do you think we'd be sitting here now?
Quite possibly not.
Band would have split, right?
It's hard to say for definite, but certainly we got the record to such a point where it had gathered so much momentum that we couldn't stop it, and we had to finish it. But I mean, on week 1 of recording, we'd most likely have been out half a dozen times and maybe recorded a bass drum. So we'd have had very little recording and well, it would have been a big task to start to try and record a whole album without Rob. Probably not. I think we'd got it to such a point when he did die that yeah, it had to be finished. But week 1 probably not for me anyway.
Do you agree with that, Martin?
Totally.
Tim says that he spent 10 years mourning Rob, and actually when he wrote the book telling stories, he mourned it in a kind of pretty catastrophic way. I mean, you know, everything from, you know, drunken nights to crack, really. So it was a fairly catastrophic. What did you find yourselves kind of mourning in ways that probably aren't too good for your health?
Well, I think rather than mourning it, I think we started celebrating it more, because we finished the record. We with the help of Duffy, then we met Tony, and we had to tour the record. And once we decided we were going to do it, it was. I think I said it on a film. We spent stupid amounts of money on things like private planes, drinking champagne.
Do you regard that as money well spent?
And we champagne Charlie'd it all the way.
Really?
Yeah, and yeah, it
Money
was,
well spent?
Absolutely, money well spent. Yeah, right up the wall.
You also were spending a lot of money. I mean, one of the classic rules, even at the time when you were recording, was to never, ever, ever go into a studio without having a song written. And you would go into studios without ever having written a single song. And I mean, just explain, the studios charge by the hour. So if you've got nothing written, then it's going to cost you an absolute fortune. I mean, were you aware of this at the time? Were you aware of how much?
No, we always had some idea, even if it was no idea when we went into a studio. There was always threads of ideas. But you think about the amount of time we used to spend recording on, it did get a bit silly, but at a 6 months probably telling stories, 8 weeks of that were building log fires or fishing.
We were very naive at the time because we didn't actually realise that we had to pay for it. We thought that the record company just picked it all up, and so we would spend 6, 8, 9 months making a record, but we didn't realise till 2 years later that it was actually we had to pay for it. Well, not for me, because I think I said to you earlier, Ben. At that time, I was I was living at my mate's flat in the box room on a blow-up bed that had a slow puncture that I had to inflate at 5:30 every morning. And so for me, 9 months in the studio was the best place on earth to be.
Centre Parks?
It was, yeah.
The thing about the movie that strikes me is it's actually a very optimistic movie. I mean, it deals with some, you know, like with Rob's death, but it's actually a very optimistic movie. Did you feel, you know, coming out of that record, that you'd kind of broken from the past and it was a new beginning? Because that's the way the film makes it look.
Yeah, very much so. I think we're fortunate in finding, as Tim mentioned in the film there, for some reason, Tony at one point was only living like a mile away from where Rob was living. It just seems to feel there's only 2 places in Britain where you can find Hammond organ players. That's Medway, Kent or Walsall. But actually, Tony did bring kind of an infectious vibe into the band. He's quite a uplifting person to be around.
Similar sort of personality to Duffy. I'm quite an opposite character to Rob, but with that sort of, well, you know, touch of genius about him, but in a completely different way.
So when you walked on stage at Nebworth, were you entirely confident things would go well? Because, I mean, you obviously rehearsed with him by then, but you hadn't had long to rehearse, had you? It's a matter of
We had about
days, wasn't it?
we had about 3 days.
3 days, yeah. For him to learn the whole set.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really remember that much about Nebworth apart from I kept a lot of eye contact with Duffy and we were just nodding at each other, and I don't think I looked out at the crowd, and then we just buggered off and got leathered.
I know we haven't got long to go, so I want to kind of throw things out to the audience.